Thanks very much. Let's begin this meeting of Audit and Governance. First of all, do we have any apologies for absence? No, we apparently have none. Thanks very much. Do any of the members have declarations of interest? No? Let's then turn to item 3, and I hope Nigel can introduce it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and apologies for the verbal update, which is the timing of the procurement, basically, where we had to enter a standstill period before we can appoint, actually. So just want to advise that of the results of the internal audit tender. Members will be aware, basically, that BDO are the current incumbent auditors for internal audit, and the current contract ends on the 31st of March 2025. We held a tender under a framework agreement, a procurement framework agreement, and the tender was advertised during October and November of last year. There were 4 submissions received from potential suppliers, and 2 of those submissions were taken forward to do more evaluation, basically, and effectively a beauty parade that was held, and an interview process, effectively. Members of ODS, OX Place, and indeed our chair, basically, were involved in the discussions with the auditors. And following an interview, I'm pleased to advise that BDO have been successfully appointed as the internal audit provider, actually. The contract's been awarded for an initial period of 4 years under the tender, with a possibility extending for a further year, basically. So a maximum of 5 years in total. The new contract will commence from April 25, and the cost is circa 115,000 a year, basically, over that period. Obviously, transitionally, basically, that should be seamless, actually, with those auditors. But that's the position that we've arrived at. Happy to take any questions.
Ros?
Thank you for the verbal update, Nigel. You've mentioned it looking up to a maximum of 5 years with this particular tender. Is there any get out early on if we have problems with their internal auditing at all? I mean, in other words, is there a break clause in the tender?
There's no break clause for the first 4 years, but there are provisions for any disputes to be handled, basically. So if there are any issues that arise, we can go down the dispute mechanism. But certainly it is a 4-year contract, and then an additional 1 year should we wish to take that.
Okay, I don't see any more questions, so thank you very much. That is noted. Now I'm just checking. We have online both Bill and Ryan, and then Laura as well. Are they all there? I'm just looking. I can see Bill. I can see Ryan. Do we have Laura online?
Laura's just loading.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's there.
Well, who's going to introduce this? Is it you, Bill, or is it Ryan?
It'll be Ryan. Yeah.
Over to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. So we're bringing the council tax base report to A&G tonight. Again, the tax base report is very similar to previous years in terms of it sort of lays out the calculations and what assumptions have been put into it and what's required. This year's tax base is projected to be 3% higher than the prediction for this time last year for 4.5. So we're projecting to, after a collection rate of 98%, which we're keeping consistent from last year, we're projecting the council tax base will be about 47,637. That's then split over the different parishes as detailed in the report as well. So these calculations then feed into the overall council tax setting calculation, which will go to full council during February. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Do I see any questions? Barbara?
I just wanted to ask, it's probably a silly question, but you say that you've set the collection rate at 98% as per last year, but do you attain that?
Yeah, so we're talking about collection rate over the lifetime of the collection period. So it won't just be for just the 5/6 financial year. It'll be for the 5/6 amount that's been charged, but over the lifetime of the debt. And generally, we aim to get towards 98%. And in comparison to other council tax years where we've charged amounts, we're there or thereabouts. So we're pretty damn good at getting to the 98%.
Sorry.
Just wanted to ask about the empty homes. We did have an empty homes officer who I was reporting quite a large number of empty homes in my ward, bizarrely too. But we don't have that anymore. So who's actually chasing this up? Are you relying on us reporting it to you, or do you have records of where there is no council tax being paid, or maybe there's council tax paid, but they're not aware it's an empty property? I don't know.
So do you have detailed records on empty homes?
Yeah, so that is kept within the council tax system. It will now, going forwards, be monitored by the revenues team in more detail. But there is a working relationship going forwards with Aspire. So housing colleagues will also be involved in that situation to just try and make sure that the empty properties are kept to a minimum where possible. But it is recorded in the council tax system as well, because we are required to put a premium on top of those charges as well.
Who do we report it to when we see an empty property in one of our streets?
Initially, I would say the housing team, but I'm sure the revenues team would be happy to report that as well. But Laura could come in on that point if she had to.
Laura, would you like to elaborate?
Yes, I can. Hello, councillor. Yes, absolutely. The long-term empties and second homes are all reported to us through a mechanism through web forms, through ongoing visits that we have, where we have 2 inspector officers who walk the city looking around what's happening. We also have fraud officers who identify properties that may be long-term empty, and as Ryan has said, we've got close working with our housing colleagues who may come across a derelict property next to maybe a housing stock property, and then they would report that to us as well.
Other questions? If not, sorry, please.
Yeah, just one point of note for members actually, on second homes premium. You might recall that this council agreed that we were looking to implement the second homes premium initially from the 1st of April 24, if we were legally able to do that. Unfortunately, the government basically advised us that because things hadn't received royal assent, we couldn't do that. And basically, we are now implementing that second homes premium, which is 100% addition to the council tax on second homes with effect from 1st of April 25. We've already agreed it by full council. This is now enacting it basically. And it is one of the main reasons why our tax base has gone up by around 3%, which is quite a considerable increase actually. But we are enacting that from April 25.
I'm sure that one question, sorry, Lois.
Thank you, Chair. How do I identify those second homes? And is there any chance of, because I thought the 668, I thought that seemed quite a small number.
I think that's possibly a Laura question. Laura, how do we identify second homes?
So actually, mostly the public tell us it's a second home. For example, they'll have a correspondence address that could be abroad, it could be somewhere else in the UK. And we also do some cross-referencing in terms of occupation. So especially now with the additional premium that Nigel has just defined, we will find that people might be suggesting that they may be back in occupation in order to stop the additional 100% charge going on. And we have got some robust processes in place to make sure that we're going out to monitor those levels of second homes.
Thank you. I note you've got the second home premium, you've got the long-term empty premium. Are we charging at the maximum permitted rates?
We are, yes. Yeah.
I had a further question, if I may. One is on, well, it's two parts, I suppose. As I recall, when we've had these returns before, the ones that are the longest term empty, recorded as empty, a high proportion of them actually were university properties, where I think the suggestion was they preferred to hang on to the building and probably use it for other purposes. I mean, not illegal purposes, but to use them as offices or something. Do we know what proportion of the longest term properties are actually university? One question. And then there is mention here of the empty dwellings management order and the role of Aspire. This has not been going on very long, and I think it's quite a legal process to do this. How many properties so far have been picked up that way? Maybe you can answer, Laura.
I can, Councillor, thank you. In terms of the percentages for the universities, I have to be honest with the meeting here that I don't know that as a percentage, and I can certainly feed that back to you as part of this process. But there, as I say, not all of them are the universities. I know that possibly the longest one we have is in excess of 10 years, and that is simply because a family have purchased a house in the hope that their child will go to Oxford University, and so they've purchased it at a cheaper rate than by the time they become 18, 19. And they have absolutely no intentions of bringing that back in. They're extremely a wealthy family, despite our trying to negotiating with them until their child attends university. In terms of Aspire, yes, it is a very new process working at the moment, Councillor. We haven't actually had any success at this precise moment, but we're in close negotiations with Aspire. What we're looking to do is ask for Aspire to work closely with the owner to see if they can bring the property back into use, and Aspire will take that on a long lease from them, for example, 5 years. And of that process, then we can then start to help people who are maybe in supported accommodation or are temporary homeless. And so we can try to regenerate that back. The couple of cases that we are discussing at the moment, some of the sticking points is about affordability and what the type of clients that will be going into people's homes, which is understandable from both organisations' point of view. So we have got a couple possibly, but I wouldn't like to say if it's going to be resolved in a short-term situation.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Maybe, please, Ros.
Sorry, I wasn't going to ask a question, but this thing about empty homes and not getting any council tax in is, and not being used is a bit of a thing in Oxford with the price of renting and buying a house being so high for people. In the ward next to mine in Headington, we have a property. It's a renowned property owned by a certain gentleman.
I know.
Exactly who you mean. And we've been promising that we'd have, I think it must be 19 years now it's been empty and left to go derelict. And it's such a shame because it's in a conservation area too. But that aside, it would be a lovely family home if it had been kept in good order. It's a little bit off tangent because all we're doing at the moment actually under this item is the council tax base and agreeing it. We can't change it as such. So we're going a little bit off tangent, I think, Chair, with talking about all the empty homes and what we're doing with them. But it is important for people to know in Oxford that we are, as a council, really trying hard to bring these empty homes back into use, because it is one thing that if you're living in a in a small apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 teenage children, it's not good, and especially if you're living on the 3rd floor or 2. And we have got quite a few families like that I know of.
Thank you. May I just ask a final question? When you look at I don't know what you call it, it's sort of band D equivalent number of rate council taxpayers versus the number of dwellings, there is a gap of just over a quarter between the total and the actual council band D equivalents. Is there any way where some of these university properties, private schools, the ones which I believe are exempt because they qualify as charities, and maybe student properties as well, is there any way in which we have the power to start to bring them within the council tax net?
Councillor, I'll pick that one up. In terms of the private schools, there was obviously a mention in the autumn budget from Rachel Reeves to state that there's going to be some amendments to the use of independent schools. We're still awaiting the legislation to allow that, and my understanding is that it will not be enacted by the 1st of April. It now will probably come in 26, just because of the short time frame now with Parliament to agree the legislation. In terms of using the, sorry, can you just repeat the question? I think, did you say bring other properties back in?
No, I was just saying, can we start to charge them the normal rate of council tax?
No, so there is a piece of case law in terms of the universities about how they're used for charity purposes, and the piece of case law actually states that it doesn't have to be in physical use of a charitable purpose, as long as the overarching benefits of a charity, then it doesn't matter. So, for example, if you take Oxford University Press, it's a trading arm of Oxford University. Those properties will still get the charitable relief when they are empty, despite the fact they have a trading arm. There is nothing we can do about it.
Thanks for a very clear answer. Okay, may I suggest that I'm looking at the recommendation that we agree with the proposed council tax base, with the projected level of collection, we had an answer on that, and that the tax bases for the parishes are as written in the papers. Is that approved? Do members agree? I see lots of nods, so thanks very much. The next item is to introduce Scott Warner to introduce about the anti-money laundering policy and the update. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Yep. So I'm here tonight to introduce the updated anti-money laundering policy and seek approval. The first point I need to raise is a minor correction, which is for information only. On the cover report, I recommended that the policy be adopted as part of the council's policy framework, but I'm told that would need full council approval. So that's not the case for this policy. It sits outside of that and forms part of the suite of documents that the council has got in place to protect its financial interests. Having said that, it does form part of the council's governance framework and ensures that we comply with legal obligations set out under the money laundering regulations, and it supports our ongoing commitment to preventing financial crime. The policy was last reviewed in 2019, and since then there's been some changes in the council and changes in legislation which have necessitated the need for review. The council's moved towards a cashless transaction environment, and there's been some updates in regulations and emerging risks as well. So I'll take you quickly through the main areas that have been updated since the 2019 version. Firstly, there's additional clarity on the inclusion of contractors and agency staff with compliance into procurement contracts. References to legislation have been updated and new and updated acts that link to money laundering risks as well. Policy makes provisions for cashless approach, but still addresses the risks on cash transactions below £5,000, which is the current reporting threshold. And finally, new provisions in the policy address the risks associated with crypto assets. And whilst this is not something the council gets involved with at the moment, we don't know what the future looks like. So this kind of future-proofs the policy in case that actually does become a thing. It is becoming more prevalent in the sector, so it's in there just to make sure if we venture down that path in the future, we're covered. That aligns us with current regulations and standards and better equips us to manage potential and emerging risks. So overall, the updated policy reflects the council's proactive stance on mitigating money laundering risks and safeguarding public funds. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Ros?
Thank you for the quick run through on the policy update. First question actually is about the recommendation. So you've mentioned that it's not going to be adopted into the City Council's policy framework as such. It doesn't need to go, because to do that it has to go to full council. Can I ask, you mentioned that the policy be approved in support of, and then I missed what you said. So what is the actual recommendation that we're going to be asked to agree this
To
evening?
approve as a policy, but not part of the policy framework. So
Right, okay, but it was in support of, you said, and then I missed what you said, sorry.
I think I said in support of the council's
Financial?
financial provisions. Yeah.
So, yeah, I was just thinking that just for the committee to have it absolutely clear, it's in
Sure.
support, the policy is in support of our financial procedures.
Yes.
And governance.
Yes.
Right, okay, lovely, thank you. Sorry to be a bit nerdy.
That's fine.
about
No,
it, but-
absolutely.
So in support of our
It does
financial,
actually say in at least the paper I've got.
but not on the recommendation at the front here.
Yes, the
what page
recommendation
have you
in
got?
Agenda 5 does say into the policy framework.
Yeah,
but
that's
you're
the part
saying
that needed
that's
the
incorrect.
correction.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's
My
for the
apologies.
So we can correct that. Thank you.
policy and procedure and governance procedures.
Yes.
And governance. And governance
Any other
procedures.
questions? Simon?
Just wondering whether the figure £5,000 comes from, is that from legislation or that?
Yeah, that's in legislation. Yeah, that applies across the board. So that's the threshold in which financial transactions have to be reported to the National Crime Agency via the Suspicious Activity Report platform.
And how frequently are we getting cash payments of several thousand or more?
In the last year, a handful, if that. We've had cause to make a number of suspicious activity reports, but not necessarily in regard to cash transactions.
Ross?
This has come up before, and it's something I think one of my colleagues identified to the final team, which were tenants of the city council actually set up for money laundering as such. So I'm thinking of businesses within the city possibly, or within the city limit, that were actually tenants of the council, set up and then not always paying on time their business rates or rent or whatever, but also set up as money laundering. And that came actually from a colleague's investigation in the centre of London, in fact, actually. I just wondered how that was going and whether this policy will be covering that sort of activity.
Yeah, so if it directly impacts the council and puts our services and financial provisions at risk, then that is something we will look at. We take each case on its merits, so it's not just a case of it being reported to us, but we look for other indicators and red flags that are consistent with money laundering. The police normally get involved if it's outside of the council, but again, if it affects the council services or represents a direct risk, then we would take action on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Maybe just, sorry, Simon.
So I suppose maybe it's what Ros was saying, but when we're renting shops or whatever to businesses, I mean, I think probably all sceptical about the number of repeated shops that appear in some rows, what their purpose is. Are we doing, in what sense are we trying to thoroughly check their genuine businesses before we let to them?
Yeah, so the team that deal with the rentals have got quite a thorough suite of due diligence checks that they undertake to ensure that the proceeds being received for rental payments are from legitimate sources. Where they're not, they will contact us, and if necessary, we will seek approval to proceed with that transaction from the National Crime Agency.
And just, I mean, the question was asked previously about cash transactions. How many cases overall do you typically get in a year? Is it still a handful?
It's
Overall, you only get very few
very
cases.
few and far between. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, may I suggest that we do as we're asked, which is that we recommend the policy be approved and adopted into Oxford City Council's financial governance, is it, or performance?
Yes, policy, but not framework. Just need to avoid the word framework.
Financial policy and governance procedures.
Okay, I see. Everyone approve? Yeah, lots of nods. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Let's now turn to the risk management report. And is this, again, I'm just trying to check who it is this time. Is it Roger who's going to introduce it? Roger Martin?
Yes, I'm here, Chair. Thank you very much. As you say, my name's Roger Martin. I'm the Council's new Insurance, Risk Management and Business Continuity Manager. And I started at the beginning of December with the Council. So the report starts on page 53 of the pack. The last time that the committee received a report on risk was in July. It concentrates on the red risks in the corporate risk register and the service risk register. The corporate risks are reviewed periodically by the corporate management team, and the next time that that's happening is on the 3rd of February, so in a couple of weeks' time. At that meeting, the risk register will be reviewed, and the aim would be to ensure that all the risks that threaten the achievement of the 2024 to 2028 strategy, and also the delivery of key statutory duties, that they are identified and included in the corporate risk register. The risk registers follow on in the pack from the report. The main changes that have taken place are that the report notes that there's a new red risk, which is numbered 12, around the increased cost and complexity for waste. The concerns were that there would need to be 100% coverage for food waste, that they would need to be free, that there is a need for free bulky waste collections, and whether the commingling of waste for recycling could continue. In fact, there's been a development since the report was written a couple of weeks ago, and that is that this risk, which I've identified as red in the report, has in fact gone to amber, and that's because £1.8 million of additional funding is being received. And it's clear that the obligations under the regulations aren't going to be quite as challenging as initially thought. The second risk that I wanted to highlight from the corporate risk register was number 6, which is entitled Health and Safety and Compliance with Legislative Requirements. And this risk has increased from amber to red, and this is around the increase is due to governance issues that have arisen and the number of urgent key decisions that needed to be made in 2024. And indeed, there was a recent report to the scrutiny committee around this. And there's also been 1 or 2 governance failures in other areas as well. The risk is being mitigated by more training, refreshing guidance and checklists, and putting in place immediate safeguards such as higher level check-in. And with these safeguards, it's thought that this risk score will soon be able to reduce to amber. So those are the 2 changes that I wanted to highlight in the corporate risk register. Moving on to the service risk registers, the service risks are periodically reviewed by the heads of service and service managers, and the risk management group has oversight and is agreeing a programme of review for the year 2025, and it's going to be starting with in the areas of housing and property. There were 2 risks that I wanted to draw to your attention, and the first one in the service risk register is number 17-LG, law and governance, and that's around the income target in this area not being achieved, and that's increased from an amber to a red. There's mitigations in place for that risk. Clearly, the service wants to maintain contact with its clients. It's seeking new clients. It's obtaining feedback from the users of its services, and it's keeping its fees and charges under review. The other service risk is in the same area, the law and governance area, number 6-LG, which is around the resilience of the service, where the scores are increasing from a green to a red. And this is around the failure to recruit and retain staff, which might lead to an inability to deliver services. With regards to this risk, there's focused recruitment in the area, trainee solicitors being brought in, the level of service to companies is being agreed and monitored, and there's professional development. So those are the main changes that I wanted to highlight to the committee. And the recommendation is that the committee review the risk management report and note its contents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Nice, clear report. Any questions from members? Lois.
Thank you, thank you. Ooh, I'm just going to move this. Thank you for the report. I just wanted to go back to two of the risks on page 56. So there's the CRR number 7, climate change emergency, and the CRR 8, climate change adaptation. They're risks which are read and are continuing to be read. Can you tell me how long they've been read?
I'm afraid I'm not able to do that, but I can check that and come back to you.
Thank you. Could you also say then, if you, I appreciate you need to go away, how long they've been read, but what are we doing differently? What new things are we doing in order to, try and bring them down to amber?
Yes. So these are two risks which will be coming in front of the senior leadership team in a fortnight, and the risks are going to be refreshed, and I can certainly comment after that, once the risks have been refreshed, on what the main mitigations are that will be in place.
Thank you. But particularly, I wanted to know if there are any new mitigations, because reading those, so for the first one, mitigations includes actively engaging partnerships. I know that's been ongoing for quite some time. I was particularly looking for if there are any new mitigation.
I don't think that, looking at the risk register, I don't think that there are any new mitigations in place since the last time that you saw this report in July.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's useful to know. Thank you.
I think Anna was next.
Yes, Anna.
Yes, I appreciate the timing of this one was not brilliant for this report, but is there going to be a new risk at one of the two levels for like devolution related stuff? Because that does feel quite pressing.
Yes, so I don't want to prejudge what the senior leadership team will do, but I would say I think that is likely. I think that will certainly be on the agenda for their meeting, or to be added into the corporate risk register on the 3rd of February.
Nigel.
I would go as far as to say that I've helped draft a risk for that, of some initial thoughts. But yes, I think that would be included.
Yeah, just to give you some assurance, I think it's actually extremely likely. As a member of the senior management team, basically, I think it would almost certainly be on there, actually.
Buzz?
Look at the business. Right, thank you. Yes, under the climate change emergency, it does say that, and I think I challenged this actually before, I have to say, Chair, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself on this one. It mentions that unable to meet local and national climate change targets due to conflicting policies. And I just wondered if officers, or maybe the cabinet member, will be actually looking at the conflicting policies and whether those could be sorted so that we could actually move from red to amber.
Anna, would you like to respond as the cabinet member?
I don't think I have a very good answer for that. So, I mean, oh yes, I mean, yeah, I'm sort of not really. I'm a member of this committee as a member of this committee, not really as the. I mean, no, I don't have a good answer for that.
Sorry to put you on the spot like that. I do apologize. I did actually mention it.
You know, they might be conflicting at like national level, right? So, I mean, there's nothing we can do about that, is there? So, yeah. Yeah.
So, Chair, just to go on to comment on the other things as well, if I could, with regard to the governance and law risks that have been identified and such, you mentioned that it's going to be partly, Roger, with regard to being able to find and perhaps grow our own lawyers, I guess, for the team.
Yes.
And I think that is a problem actually, because there is actually a shortage of people going into law and wanting to come into local authorities. But also it's the same for governance. I'm thinking of auditors as well. We've often spoken about the lack of qualified auditors in the country as well, because the commercial companies, BDO, nodding ahead, also having difficulty recruiting and training up auditors. So I'm just wondering whether you mentioned having trainee lawyers, are we also looking to have trainee auditors as well, like apprenticeships?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that question, but I can find out and come back to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, on that one, I think it's highly unlikely. So we would actually, I mean, obviously our audit provision is made through BDO basically. So, you know, effectively we've outsourced that element of the service. And as you said, for the reasons basically that you say, that auditors are very difficult to come by. So, you know, I think it's easier for us to actually outsource and get someone else to do the job for us.
Simon.
I mean, yeah, I think my observation on the climate ones is we're going to go bright red as of something that happened today, which is obviously out of our hands. But the law and governance one that's gone green to red, it strikes me that are we just not paying enough to get lawyers? Surely we should have been able to see this coming and things shouldn't go from green to red.
I actually add to that. I mean, the one thing which strikes me, these two related to law and governance and upgrading to red. I mean, in terms of failure to secure the income target, that is not unique to law and governance. In terms of the failure to recruit, well, if you just look down at corporate property and assets, 3 below it, that's also got recruitment and retention. And I'm certain that Nigel to my left will say it's the same thing for finance. I'm not quite clear why on earth this is just singled out in the case of law and governance. Should this be more, I guess, a corporate risk rather than a service risk? I don't know. I know that Emma's on the call. I'm not sure she's meant to be representing law and governance, but since you're there, may I ask you, Emma, whether you feel you are unique? I'm sure you're unique in many ways, but are you unique in this respect?
No, I don't think we are, Chair. Thank you for inviting me in. We do have difficulty recruiting solicitors at the moment. The major challenge is salary, and there are a lot of local government lawyers who are willing now only to work as locums, which makes it very expensive for the council because they're paid on an hourly rate, and we just can't compete. So we unfortunately have 6 locums working for us at the moment. I mean, they're all very good, but they're very expensive. And we're a small team, and we find that some decisions that are made elsewhere in the organisation are made without consideration of the impact on the legal team. And so it just means that we're very stretched in the way of resources and rely on locums intermittently.
Chair, might I chip in if I may?
Yes, of course.
I just would draw the committee's attention to the corporate risk CRR-003, which is entitled Workforce Sustainability. And that's a wider recruitment and retention of staff risk than the more narrow focus of the law and governance one. And it's talking about problems around increases in demand, equal pay and things of that ilk. So the issue is represented wider than just the law and governance area.
Okay, thanks very much. Ros?
I mean, I think it's going to be a risk for all local authorities. This is just a comment, if I could, Chair. I mean, given with the body blow that we all had in December from national government about devolution and changing ways of doing things, I think the last thing we wanted, actually, as local councils getting out of the pandemic and recovering from that and the shockwaves that had. Also, the increase in national insurance and so forth that councils are going to have to find. So it's extra money we're going to have to find. Have the body blow, I think, again in December with this reorganisation was not fair, I have to say. And I do worry for the morale of the staff, actually, not at all levels of government, apart from perhaps parish, which they're not so affected, but certainly districts and county council staff, I think, are feeling there. And it's an uncomfortable time, I think, until we know exactly what national government wants to do with us. But we are in their hands.
Okay, that's to note. Any other comments, questions? Simon?
I mean, we seem to claim that we negotiate good deals with trade unions are accepted, but if we aren't being able to appoint staff and we're having to pay for more expensive staff, then we do need to go back and look at those pay rates, I would suggest.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. There is some work underway that I'm not really privy to or involved with, the pay and grading review, which is looking at the pockets where it's difficult to recruit. So there is some work being undertaken to try and address the issues, but it's still to be concluded.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, maybe I'll repeat what I always say at this point, which is I still don't understand why the two climate change red risks, corporate risks are not made into one, but that's just my view. But other than the change that you've already mentioned, which is in terms of downgrading now CRR 12, about waste, which I assume that will be noted so that we change it in the minutes of this meeting. And we've heard your comments about the health and safety you think may soon be downgraded. And we've also heard that the reorganisation of local government is almost certain going to be added. But rather than jump ahead, I suppose the one we should note is the one you've said has already actually been determined, which is the down. But other than that, will the committee agree that we've reviewed the risk management report and note the contents with that one change? Is that okay? Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Roger. So now we've been asked if we can these are both with the internal auditor, and we've got Yasmin here. You've requested to reverse, is that correct? Items 8 and 7, which is fine by me if you want to do that. Yeah? Okay, please. So we'll start with the progress report, and we have officers here, I think, it's Roger again, actually, in terms of item 8. So Roger, you're going to have a role again. So Yasmin, would you like to introduce item 8, which is the follow-up of recommendations? Sorry, I was just turning my paper. It's a progress, yes, please.
Oh, that's apologies. Thanks, Chair. So I'll start with the progress report. So we'll be presenting the following reports today. One is risk management internal audit report. This was again assessed against our risk maturity assessment toolkit. And then over on agenda item 7, we've got the follow-up report. In terms of progress on the internal audit plan, we're not quite where we want to be in terms of progress. This is mainly due to quite a few staff absences in Q3. But having said that, we have progressed reports as much as possible. So we have 2 reports out in draft. One is homelessness prevention and GDPR as the other one. and we are working with management to obtain responses for those. We do have further work underway. So QL optimization is coming to a conclusion. Affordable housing has started, and data analytics is also coming to a conclusion. So I am confident that come July, Audit and Governance Committee will have completed the plan alongside the Head of Internal Audit opinion as well. In terms of the internal audit planning process, we're at that time of year again, where planning is underway for the 25-26 internal audit plan. We will initially share the plan with Nigel, and then we will present it to the operational delivery group for feedback in February, and then we'll bring you an audit plan come April time for approval. I'll pause there for any questions, and then I'll move on to the risk management report.
Are there any questions? This is beginning on page, I've been looking, this is on page 97 in our papers. May I ask one question? I know this is not due to be discussed this time, but it's sad to see in terms of both Audit 4, this is your draft report on homeless prevention, and then on the GDPR one, that we have limited, one in one case effectiveness, one in design, which is quite unusual for this council. I know it's draft, but do you have any particular issues which has given rise to two limiteds in your draft reports?
I can touch on the homelessness prevention one, Chair. We are speaking with management. I think there was further information that was required on that draft report. So once we do get that evidence in, it's most likely that that opinion may change. But again, that's just subject to partner approval. In terms of the GDPR report, I can't say at this minute in terms of kind of the limited until it's not been through management responses and agreement. But I will be able to give you kind of a fuller picture come next audit committee. That's okay. Sorry.
Sounds right. I noticed that Roger is often the lucky man who's down to respond on your report on risk management and risk maturity, and you have various comments. Do you have any particular response, Roger, on what is said in this report?
Yeah, I mean, I think the council was generally in agreement with the report. We've gone through it with the internal auditor. The first thing that they wanted was that the council should review the risks to make sure that they are clearly understandable. That's a very reasonable request. They wanted additional columns linking the risks to the priorities in the 24-28 strategic plan, and saying what category the risks are. And again, we thought that was helpful. There's a request for a risk appetite statement to be in the council's risk management strategy, and that strategy is going to be reviewed very soon. And I think the plan is that it comes back to the next audit committee. And so we're going to think about a statement around the council's risk appetite that would need to be agreed by the council's risk management group and by yourselves. The challenge for me there is to make sure that it isn't just sort of fine words on paper, but that it has sort of practical impact, and it really is tuned in to where the council is with regards to the level of risk that it's prepared to carry. The third area that's covered in the report is that the council should review the controls that are in the risk register to make sure that they're up to date, and that the correct risk owners are allocated, and that the controls are in place. And again, that seems very reasonable. It asks for the council's risk management group to have a work plan in place for the review of service risk registers, and that is something that we are putting in place for 2025, and it's already been agreed that the first areas to to be covered will be housing and property. Since the report was prepared, we've also reviewed the terms of reference, which it asks us to do. And it also asks that an assessment be made of what the council's training needs are. So all of those seem to be very reasonable. There's an observation is that that the council might want to consider having KPIs in this area, and I think the council wanted to make sure that it deals with these first 5 recommendations and have all those good things in place and make sure they're working before it then considered whether KPIs were the way to go in this particular area. So I think, generally speaking, there's a great deal of agreement, which I think is included in the management responses within the report.
Thank you very much. I don't see any more hands, so maybe we should, in this case, we just note the report. Thank you very much. And now we go to agenda item 7, which is the follow-up of recommendations. Would you like to introduce that, Yasmin?
Thanks, Chair. So we've outlined the follow-up report. I think this is slightly different in terms of kind of the table and the summary that is usually presented. So I've outlined 23-24, all the audit reviews, and then the recommendations that are higher, medium to follow up. A majority of them are complete except for recruitment and retention. There were 5 medium recommendations that were due for follow-up, and those are currently in progress. A majority of them have been completed, but we will keep them as in progress until it's all fully embedded within the system. And then we've got accounts payable, which was a 24-25 review. With this one, there was 1 recommendation that was completed, and then 1 recommendation on accounts payable, which is still in progress. Again, while spot checks and kind of processes are being discussed with ODS, it's not fully embedded within the system, and so it remains in progress. There's also 1 high recommendation for data analytics, and this was around the procurement card transactions, where they weren't being reviewed on a regular basis. They are being done now, and I have seen those reports coming out, and there's regular reminders being sent on to officers as well, which is great. But again, we plan to close this once things have fully embedded within the system. It's early days as of yet, and we will follow it up as part of the April Audit and Governance Committee again. And then we'll look to complete it and sign that off.
Thank you very much. Now we've got Phil McGaskill and we've got Stephanie Nichols on the online, who are the officers who are going to be giving the responses, I guess, to what we've just heard from Yasmin. Shall we start? I don't know who wants to go first. I think, well, actually, Phil is the one who's down for the one, high priority, and then some other ones. Phil, would you like to go first, please?
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, councillors. I'm relatively new to the management of this particular team. We've been working with Yasmin on the back of the report to deal with several issues that have been ongoing for quite some time. I think it's fair to say that we've been able to make considerable progress towards mitigating and to ruling out the risks. The one red risk to which Yasmin refers is around the audit actions required for credit card payments. We have got a new process in place and it is operating effectively now. We just haven't had it running and working in place long enough for Yasmin to be able to satisfy herself that it's truly embedded and we were able to sign that off. There's one other, I think, medium risk, Yasmin, that we talked about, which was Oh, sorry, it's just escaped me for a second. Around
New supplies.
around our reporting, where we had some problems delivering certain reports and KPIs. We've investigated what was wrong with the reporting tool, and we've discovered that it was actually out of date, the operating system on which it sat. So we're currently in a position to write a new tool using Power BI, and I expect that will be in place and ready for sign off by our next meeting. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Phil? You seem to have mastered your brief very well, so thank you very much.
I'm actually enjoying this, Chair. It's been an area where I've been able to expand some of my skills, and I'm quite enjoying the challenge.
That's very nice to hear. I wish that were true of all officers. Stephanie, you have, I don't know, is it 5 down as
Yes.
incomplete or in
Yes.
progress? What's your response to Yasmin's comments?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Steph Nichols. I'm the People Team Operations Manager. I'm actually covering for Gail Malcolm, who wasn't able to attend tonight. So it's as Yasmin said, really, that you know, everything is in progress. We've completed a lot of the actions. We've just got some embedding to do with some of them. So the new recruitment and selection policy is done and is with Gail Malcolm. There was a delay with this as our employee turnover has increased, which resulted in work pressures from an operational recruitment perspective. The workflow chart is now on the intranet and will also accompany the policy. So we've actually made further progress since the report was done. We're still having to use different systems because it's not possible to put everything in iTrent. But we will be going out to procure a new recruitment system that obviously we will focus on something that will better meet our needs than the current systems that we have in place. We continue to engage with managers on improvements and changes that we're making on the recruitment and selection side. Recruitment monitoring data on such as time to hire. Unfortunately, we don't have the system functionality currently for time to hire, but we can assess time taken from when we advertise to when somebody actually starts with us. So we have those metrics. iDocs is going to remain as the main document storage. Roles and responsibilities are clear. We don't expect managers to upload the documents to iDocs. We do that for them. And we are completing risk assessments by way of mitigation should we have new starters starting that haven't got their DBS check in place. We have noted in terms of supporting evidence required for 4A and 4B, which those actions have been completed. Once we receive confirmation of what evidence is required, we will of course send that through. And the same in relation to 5A as well, in terms of agreeing a work plan and providing the evidence, the support and evidence. Any questions?
Simon.
I think this is for Yasmin, actually. So these actions seem to be about recruitment. There aren't any about retention. So obviously we don't need to recruit people if we retain people. Is there an issue with retention that you've identified?
I'll have to go back to the report, Councillor, to check because this was done in 24-25. There was, I believe there was a recommendation around a retention policy. But others, again, I'll have to come back to you on that and just check. But we did raise some findings around retention as well.
Could I ask you, Stephanie, in terms of retention, I mean, as I recall, when we've had, I think it would be at this committee. We've had data often on turnover and the like, and we seem to be average for local authorities. I don't know, do you have any data, maybe on newer recruits, on retention? Is there higher turnover among newer recruits than among the main body of staff?
No, I don't have that data to hand. I mean, we can have a look at it and come back on it and try and sort of isolate those people in terms of retention.
I think that would be useful because we've gathered, you know, retention, well, recruitment retention comes up all the time under different service areas in this meeting. So maybe you could get back to us with that.
Yes,
I was
of course.
also, if I may, going to make one comment. I had the impression from what you said, it sounds as if we are being held back because we have, I don't know if the word's out of date, computer systems, IT systems, and you're waiting for new ones. I just wonder, is this all being tackled in the proposed IT capital investments that are, I know, being proposed in the current budget round?
I'm unable to answer that, to be honest, because that would be Gail that would understand how that's been proposed and budgeted for. But again, we can come back. I can come back to you on that.
It's maybe unfair to us, but Nigel's had to go to a meeting of group leaders, so that's why he's popped out, but he would probably know the budget by heart, so.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, we have our next finance and performance panel tomorrow. They never seem to end. I think it's our 5th or 6th this month. I don't think any of the lucky people on this committee are on it, besides myself. Any other questions for Stephanie? Thank you very much. So, and for Yasmin, no more. So I think we can again note the report and many thanks. Now we are turning to external auditor. And so this is agenda item 9. I think it's you, Andrew, who's going to introduce first the progress report and then the statement of accounts, which we saw earlier, I think, in draft form. So over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will introduce item 9, the progress report. I'll hand over to Nigel/Bill for item 10. First strikes me that this is the first committee I've been able to attend in person. By way of introduction, Andrew Britton, audit partner for the external audit of the council, EY partner for a number of years, but taking over this particular audit from my colleague Maria Grindley, who retired at the end of year, having completed up to 22-23 in terms of the council's audit opinions. So we're presenting today the interim report showing progress on our 23-24 audit. The audit plan was brought to the October committee. I'll take the report as read, but I did want to provide a verbal update on the status of where we are since this report was written at the beginning of the month. So by way of probably talking to the key areas, so page 121 of the report lays out the key areas of audit focus for us. So just as I say, by way of update, in item number 2, we have now completed our work on REFCUS with no issues to bring to the committee's attention on that. Also on the valuation of land and buildings, we've had the queries in relation to our specialists' review of the assets indicated in the report there. Those have been addressed, waiting for a finalisation of a report from my valuation team, but do not expect there to be any significant adjustments arising from their work. In terms of the pension valuation, work well progressed here now in the review stage. We've had the report from our specialist team and also from the pension fund auditors at the county, so making good progress there. In terms of the group consolidation, we've had the reporting from the subsidiary auditors, and we're just working through the final consolidation entries were within the group accounts. The other areas are ongoing. There's a more detailed list in Appendix B to this report on page 151, detailing some of the other areas that we're still working through. I would say that all areas are subject to final review and conclusion, but happy to take any questions on any items in the report at this time, Chair.
Any questions? Do you have one, Anna? No. Could I just ask one? I note that near the beginning on page 120, in value for money, you said, and as you said, this was written at the start of this month, our work in the area of value for money is still happening, still continuing. When will it be ready? Do you know?
It will be ready at the same point that we report on the financial statements, Chair. It is ongoing, as I say. We are continuing to work through. There are no matters in relation to the value for money that have come to my attention as yet, but obviously work continues right to the point of concluding the audit.
Thank you very much. Do I see any? Oh yes, sorry, Bill, there you are.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to add to what Andrew said, that there's been a substantial amount of work done already on this audit. It's been a lot more work than previous years because of disclaimed accounts. And the council officers and also the auditors have been in very close contact and have worked very closely together to get us to the point that we're at, and hopefully get us further on by the time the accounts are signed off by the backstop date. So I just wanted to mention that to the Audit and Governance Committee.
Thank you.
I would concur with what Bill said.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad there's progress. Any questions? Yes, Ros.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the risks and so forth, and the key judgments on the estimates, particularly of values and so forth, the value of assets and things. I just wondered, you mentioned challenging key assumptions used by the valuers. Is that going to be that we're going to be seeing some delay, or are we going to get to the point where you can give an unqualified opinion?
So obviously, with an ongoing process, I can't conclude at this point. As I said, the more tricky and specialist assets we get our valuations team involved in. My understanding from, as I say, still waiting for their final report. My understanding is that the assets that they've looked at, they expect them. There's a few additional queries that they were talking to the valuers, the council's external valuers about. It looks like they'll conclude that they are within a reasonable range. So I don't expect that to cause either delays or indeed significant adjustments to that particular set of assets that they have that we've looked at.
Sorry, if I could, but I'm right in thinking I've got to get Nigel on this, but actually the valuation doesn't make a difference to our end balances as such. It's just a figure.
Not to the general fund, yeah, correct.
But it just, it's just almost sort of irritating to have to do this, given every year and so forth. But we are where we are with the current way of doing audit. I mean, that was something that was mentioned actually, of course, in the announcement in December from National Government. And I think everybody would breathe a sigh of relief if the changes are made to that evaluations for audit for councils. Just a comment, I think, more than anything. And I see Nigel nodding away too.
Thank you. Anna.
So when it comes to valuations, how much overlap is there with respect to the valuations for insurance? Because I know this came up recently as well, that there was an increased burden of doing that. So yeah, how much overlap is there? Or was there frustratingly little?
Can you answer that? I guess it's Andrew in the first instance, then Bill.
Well, I can't answer a question about how much is done for insurance purposes, so it's probably Bill.
Yes, it is myself. No, the insurance valuations is completely different, and it's undertaken by an actuary. We've actually got that process in hand at the moment that all of our insurance data is currently with an actuary and they're looking through it. Yeah, as I say, it's completely separate to property valuations where you have to have a property valuer, whereas on the insurance side, they look at kind of historical claims that we've received to date and do a valuation on what the potential cost to the council is going to be.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands, so I'm going to say thank you. And we've discussed the report, so we note it. And now we come to statement of accounts. And I'm just going to make one suggestion. I don't know if the rest of you've had time to pore over the detail. I have quite a few small questions, which I'm going to suggest, if they're small questions, we had training in interpreting the accounts. I have some small ones about particular numbers, which I'm going to suggest, rather than take the time of the committee, I will send them in the first instance to Bill, I think, for answering. So I'm inviting now first, Bill, do you want to just have a brief summary on the state of play, really, with the disclaimers and everything, on what we're being asked in the end to recommend, in terms of finally signing off on the accounts as they are now. Would you like to introduce that? And then if the committee has any substantial questions, or maybe Andrew, please do it after that. If that's okay, over to you, Bill.
Okay, yeah, so the purpose of this report is actually to get the committee to approve a delegation for the statements to be signed off. The background of this, as the committee will be aware, is that the council got disclaimed opinions on the 2021-2 and 22-23 accounts. What that means is that we will not get a clean audit opinion for these accounts. And in fact, in the report, I do identify, it's page 157 of the pack, that's the potential trajectory depending on how the work goes, bearing in mind it's a very heavy workload for both ourselves and the auditors. But the best position that the council can be in is by getting an unmodified opinion, which is otherwise known as unqualified, by 26-27. So the statement of accounts for 3-4, as it stands at the moment, have been presented to committee. There are likely to be a few changes to that. We haven't got anything kind of really substantial at the moment, beyond the changes that have already been put through, but we will be discussing those with the auditors, and any changes I will make the chair of Audit and Governance Committee and head of Financial Services aware of these, assuming that you actually do agree the recommendation to provide delegations. And that's a delegation for both the statement of accounts for 23-4, sorry, and also a letter of representations for 23-4. We haven't got a draft of the letter of representations for 23-4 at the moment, because that can't be provided until it's gone through the sort of national review at Ernst & Young. And then they will provide us with a letter, but I've provided you, as an example, the 22-3 letter of recommendations, just so you can, it kind of brings it fresh to mind as to what the sort of format is and the types of questions that are asked. The questions can change year on year, and it depends really on what's happened during the audit, and also moves nationally as to exactly what questions are asked. But that's the sort of general tenure of the letter of representations. So I think I'll pass that back to the committee if you've got any substantive questions around that, or around the actual process that we're talking about here?
I mean, may I just ask one question of Andrew here? Looking at that page 157, I mean, what you say just before presenting the table is the quickest trajectory is the one that you show there. And in part, this depends clearly on the external auditor. Andrew, do you feel that we are reasonably confident that that page will represent the situation for this council?
Well, Chair, obviously, as you see from the way the table works, is each year is dependent on the previous year. So, this is the guidance that has been issued nationally that Bill has picked up and replayed, and on the assumption that for each individual year you would reach that conclusion, then the following year then flows from that. In all likelihood, we do expect most councils to achieve that. If there are issues in any one particular year, that obviously delays the unwinding by one further year. But I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm unfortunately can't tell you that that's definitely going to be the case. We are certainly working with all of our audits, including the council here, to enable that to happen from our perspective. But until we get to those points, it's impossible to definitively say so.
Okay, thanks. Lois?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Bill. What's the implication of potential, the devolution that might be coming if Oxford City Council ceases to be? Then what's the implication on these accounts? Because what if we're not here in 25, 26?
Yeah, it's a very good question, that, and one that I can't really definitively answer. What would happen, I think, is that there would have to be combined accounts put together for a new organisation that would pick up on the position of the individual component parts of that as they're kind of taking in bits of different organisations. So I think the trajectory potentially would be delayed, I think, on that, in that respect. But I think Andrew is probably wanted to say something on that.
Yeah. Go over to you, Andrew.
Thank you. So obviously it's kind of a hypothetical question, because we don't know what the reorganisation might look like, what combinations and when it might happen. But if I just draw a parallel with one of your neighbouring authorities, so I was the auditor for a number of the Buckinghamshire district councils prior to the Buckinghamshire Council and the unitary being created there. Essentially, what happens is that the date of the unitary being in that case a unitary council being created, which was the 1st of April. I'm going to get my years wrong now. I think it was the 1st of April 22, but I might be a year out. All the functions cease to exist on the 31st of March of all the preceding councils, both the county and the districts, and those functions move to the new body. Now, obviously operationally that works, there's kind of slightly more overlap in terms of having a shadow authority, but in terms of the financial accounting, which is the question that was asked, the accounts are prepared to the 31st of March for all the predecessor bodies, and then, as Bill quite rightly says, a new set of accounts are created from the 1st of April of that new body coming into existence, and they subsume all of the assets and liabilities of the predecessor bodies, and then assuming it is the 1st of April, we will then present a set of accounts the following 31st of March that encompassed all of the activities of those of the new authority in whatever form it was created.
Just one more follow-up question. Thank you. That's very helpful. But is it still incumbent upon that new body to then carry on with the retrospective work on the accounts for the previous entities that no longer exist?
Once they cease to exist, the requirement to produce accounts also ceases to exist. So the parallel I drew there with Buckinghamshire, obviously the scenario didn't exist with if you're specifically linking it to disclaimed accounts. So I would be speculating if I was to say how that might pan out in this particular example, but my expectation would be that you'd have a cessation of a need to prepare accounts in relation to the predecessor bodies, and then a new creation of a new authority and therefore a new set of accounts from that point forwards.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? As I say, if you have, as I do, a few small ones, I'm just going to email them to Bill in the first instance, because I'm sure he can answer them to save time. But Ross.
Chair, thank you for that. And it would be useful if Bill could perhaps send out the email answer to all committee members, not just yourself, because I'm sure there might be things that we have thought about too. I mean, the biggest thing with having these unqualified accounts and things and going to a new unitary or even bigger than that or whatever, is just the risk actually for local authority finances. And I think the pressure as well on financial staff is huge.
I mean, this always comes up. If we have, as we do, disclaimer, does that affect, as far as you know, the terms on which the council companies can get borrowings and so on? And maybe I can ask you, Nigel.
Yeah, if you were in the private sector and you were doing a deal with another private sector organisation, and that organisation had a disclaimed set of accounts or unqualified, a qualified opinion, effectively, I think it would undoubtedly affect that business. I think in local government terms, it's slightly different. I think that is the only area that I think it could affect things where ODS or even OX Place rely on the financial position of their parents, i.e. OCC, basically. And I think in that situation, I'll probably just need to give that assurance as the chief financial officer of the local authority, actually, that it is a bit of a different position. You know, we are not another private sector organisation, basically, that's, you know, got disclaimers. Basically, we're a local authority, and I usually say at this stage we're not going anywhere, but that might be that might be speculative, actually. But you take the point that, you know, we are a local authority, and it's got to be slightly different. It's not unheard of that organisations, you know, certainly with ODS, say, can I have a letter of comfort from your chief financial officer, basically, you know, that you know, there is support there from the council. I'm not looking to draw any loans back off the companies and so on and so forth, actually. So it can affect things, basically, but I like to think that you know, some words of assurance from the chief financial officer of the council may well be able to smooth those things over.
Just to come back, Chair, I mean, it obviously affects our treasury management to some extent. Or could
not really. I mean, with PWL, we got our money like most local authorities from PWLB and Public Works Loan Board, and you know, therefore, I can probably borrow any amount, providing I am signing it off that it's prudent and affordable. So on my head be it, basically. So I don't think I think it's fair to say it doesn't really affect even that. Basically, they will continue to borrow and lend to the authority, actually. So.
Thank you. With that, may we do as is put in the agenda, which is note the report and the potential audit trajectory with all the caveats. We don't know what's actually going to be the structure of this council. Approve the 23-24 statement of accounts as agreed by Nigel beside me, and authorise myself on your behalf to sign the accounts incorporating any further changes arising from the audit as it unfolds. Agree to the signing of a letter of representation incorporating the statement by the external auditor arising from this audit to enable it to be signed and dated on the date of signing and enable the opinion to be issued. And I should mention that about the last act of Maria Grindley was with Bill, I think at the stroke of midnight or something, we signed with DocuSign our letter, and it went off to Maria just in time for her to take her retirement. So I imagine without anyone retiring, I think it's a similar procedure. So may we do as is recommended here? I see lots of nodding. Thanks very much, in which case we turn to the minutes of the last meeting, which is right near the end. Are there any corrections, comments? Do they seem a fair, correct report of our meeting? Thank you very much. And note that we are meeting in early April, not on April Fool's Day, but the following day. So in the meantime, we have a fool taking charge of the US government, but not much we can do about that. So with those happy words, thank you all very much indeed.